Rita walked through the city streets for hours, her swollen feet aching in shoes that pinched and rubbed. Every corner felt alien, every person a stranger. She had no address, no money, no way to call anyone. Her only possessions were the tattered clothes on her back, her notebook, and the small Bible that had been given to her in prison. Eventually, as evening fell, she found herself on the steps of a small church tucked between two apartment buildings. The sounds of a choir floated out through the open doors. She hesitated, but hunger and exhaustion pushed her forward. Inside, the air was cool, fragrant with incense. People sat quietly in the pews, praying or reading. A kindly older woman noticed Rita lingering at the entrance and gestured her over. "You look like you need a place to rest, child," the woman said gently. "Come, sit here." Rita sank into the pew, her body shaking, and tears rolled down her cheeks. The woman brought her a small blanket and a cup of warm water. "You're safe here," she whispered. "No one will hurt you. What's your name?" "Rita," she croaked. "Rita Lawson." The woman nodded. "Rita, sometimes life hits us harder than we can bear. But God gives us the strength to stand again. You rest tonight. Tomorrow, we'll see how we can help you." For the first time in months, Rita let herself breathe. She curled the blanket around her, resting her hands on her belly. The baby kicked, and she smiled weakly through her tears. Somehow, they had both survived the impossible. The next morning, Rita met with the woman, who introduced her to a small network of volunteers and social workers who helped women in crisis. They arranged for her to stay in a small, safe shelter for expectant mothers. She was given basic food, prenatal care, and, slowly, a sense of stability. She began to take small steps toward rebuilding her life. She found part-time cleaning work at a local office, careful to avoid hotels. She enrolled in online courses to finish her degree, determined to reclaim what had been stolen from her. Each day was a struggle, but Rita discovered an inner resilience she hadn't known she possessed. By the time her baby was born, a healthy, crying little girl, Rita had found a fragile sense of hope. She named her Lionel, after the pages in her notebook where she had written about strength, survival, and dreams that refused to die. Holding Lionel in her arms, she swore she would protect her, provide for her, and never let the cruelty of others dictate their lives again. Years passed. Rita worked tirelessly, balancing school, work, and raising Lionel alone. Life was still hard, but she had a purpose and a future she could shape with her own hands. She became known in her community for her tenacity and kindness, quietly helping other women who had fallen through the cracks of the system. One afternoon, she received an unexpected message. Aaron had returned to town. He wanted to speak to her, he said. Her heart clenched at the thought of the man who had accused her, the man whose indifference had cost her so much. And yet, something inside her stirred. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a curiosity. He had been gone for 7 years, but his presence still lingered in her memories like a shadow she couldn't shake. The stage was set for their confrontation. The woman who had suffered, survived, and grown stronger was no longer the frightened student who had walked into room 305. Rita Lawson was ready. 7 years had changed everything. Rita stood behind the counter of the small cafe where she worked, her hands busy with steaming cups of coffee and the aroma of fresh bread filling the air. Lionel, now 7 years old, sat at a corner table, carefully drawing in her notebook. Rita kept one eye on her daughter at all times. The little girl was bright, curious, and fiercely independent, and she had inherited her mother's determination. It was late afternoon, the cafe bathed in golden sunlight. The door chimed, and Rita looked up. She froze. Aaron. He hadn't changed much. Still tall, still imposing, with the same sharp features she remembered. But the hardness in his eyes had softened slightly, or maybe she was just imagining it. He looked older, wearier, and something about the way he hesitated in the doorway told her he hadn't expected to see her here. Rita's heart pounded, but she stayed composed. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. "Rita," he said softly, almost uncertainly. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, She gestured politely toward the counter. Can I help you? Her voice was steady, but there was steel beneath the calm. Aaron nodded. He took a step forward, then another, stopping a few feet away from her. I heard about you. About everything. His voice faltered. Don't, she said sharply. Don't say it. I don't need your pity. He flinched at her tone, but didn't retreat. I know I have no right, he said quietly. I shouldn't even be here. Rita's eyes narrowed. Then leave. He shook his head. Not yet. I need to apologize. Something in her chest twisted. 7 years. 7 years of pain, humiliation, and struggle, and he still thought an apology could undo it. You ruined my life, she said, her voice low but steady. You accused me of a crime I didn't commit. You didn't care that I was drugged, her throat caught. She swallowed hard. That I was violated. You didn't care and you moved on. Aaron looked down, ashamed. I know, he whispered. I was wrong. I didn't know. I didn't understand what happened. But You don't get to explain, Rita snapped. You get to listen. He nodded, silent now. And she took a deep breath, forcing herself to keep control. My daughter, Rita said, finally allowing herself to speak the truth. Her name is Lyanna. She's 7. I raised her alone after everything. I survived. I built a life, Aaron. Without you, without anyone believing me. And now you walk in here expecting what? Forgiveness. Aaron's eyes were glistening. I don't expect anything, he said, his voice almost breaking. I needed you to know that I regret what I did. Lyanna looked up from her notebook, her curious eyes scanning the tense scene. She tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mama, she said softly. Who is that? Rita knelt beside her daughter, shielding her with her arm. No one you need to worry about, she said gently, though her heart was racing. Aaron's gaze fell on Lyanna, and something in him stiffened. He seemed to realize, in that instant, the full weight of the consequences of his past actions. Rita straightened, taking a step back. You can leave now, she said coldly. I don't want anything from you. I don't need your apologies. You lost the right to my life a long time ago. Aaron swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. Rita's jaw tightened. That's all I needed to hear, she said. Now go. Please. He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping. Take care of her. Take care of yourself. Rita watched him leave, the cafe door chiming behind him. Once it clicked shut, she exhaled shakily, feeling the tension drain out of her. She turned to Lyanna, who had been watching silently. Mama, is he gone? She asked. Yes, baby, Rita said softly, kneeling to hug her daughter tightly. He's gone. And we're okay. We're safe. For the first time in years, Rita felt a flicker of peace. The past still lingered, but she was no longer defined by it. She had survived, she had built a life, and most importantly, she had Lyanna. Together, they were stronger than anything the world could throw at them. Rita wiped her hands on her apron and leaned against the counter, watching Lyanna sketch quietly at the corner table. The cafe hummed with the soft murmur of afternoon customers and the clatter of cups and plates. She had carved out a life from nothing, small, humble, but entirely her own. Every day was a battle she chose to fight, not the one she had been forced into years ago. The bell above the door chimed again. Rita glanced up automatically, her heart giving a small, involuntary jolt. Aaron. He hesitated in the doorway this time, more tentative than before. His eyes were softer now, carrying something she hadn't seen in him before, regret, humility, maybe even fear of her anger. Rita straightened, her body taut with tension. She had spent 7 years imagining this moment, planning the words she would never allow him to speak. But now that he was here, she found herself surprisingly calm, almost clinical in her judgment. He took a careful step forward. Rita, he said quietly. She didn't answer. She didn't even glance at him. Her hands continued their work, grinding coffee beans and filling mugs, each motion deliberate. I know I have no right, he continued, his voice strained. I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to try. Please, just hear me out. Rita finally looked up, her eyes like ice. You want to try? You want to try what? To erase 7 years of my life being stolen from me? You had your chance, Aaron. You made your choice. You didn't believe me. You ruined me. Aaron flinched, as though her words struck him physically. I know. No, she snapped, cutting him off. Don't you dare start explaining. Don't you dare apologize and expect anything from me. 7 years, Aaron. 7 years of building a life from nothing, and you walk in here thinking a few words can fix it. Aaron swallowed hard, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. I know it doesn't fix anything. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking for the truth to be known, to be honest about what happened, and for you to know that I regret it every day. Rita's chest tightened. Her mind flashed back to that night. The bed, the blue light, the suffocating chemical smell, the pain, the humiliation, the pregnancy, the prison. Every memory rose unbidden, but instead of breaking her, it steeled her. You don't get to just walk in and ask for absolution, she said, voice low but deadly calm. I survived without you. I thrived without you. And I'll continue to do so, with or without your approval. So leave, Aaron. Leave before I decide that your presence here is a threat I won't tolerate. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes lingered on her. I will leave. But if you ever want to talk, if you ever want to, I don't know, reconcile, anything, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes. Rita's jaw tightened, but she didn't reply. She simply turned back to the espresso machine, forcing her hands to work. Lina glanced up at her mother, sensing the tension but not understanding it fully. Aaron stepped toward the door. Take care of her, Rita. Take care of yourself. With that, he left, the door's chime echoing in the quiet cafe. Rita exhaled slowly, gripping the counter until her knuckles whitened. Lina hopped off her chair, running to her mother. Mama, are you okay? Rita forced a small, tired smile. I'm fine, baby. I'm fine. Come sit. Let's finish your drawing. She held her daughter close for a moment, feeling the warmth and life in her arms, the only proof she needed that she had survived, that she had won in the end. 7 years had tried to break her, but here she was, standing, stronger, wiser, and unshakable. And as the afternoon sun streamed through the cafe windows, casting a golden glow over mother and daughter, Rita realized something important. She was no longer the scared, helpless girl of that hotel. She was the woman who had survived, the mother who had protected, and the fighter who would never allow anyone, not even Aaron, to steal her life again. Rita closed the cafe door behind her that evening, the warm aroma of baked bread and coffee lingering in the small space. It had been another long day, another day of working double shifts, managing the accounts, making sure the small business she had built from scratch stayed afloat. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Every brick of it was built by her hands, paid for by her sweat, her perseverance, and every sacrifice she had made for Lina. Lina was asleep in the small apartment above the cafe, curled up with her notebook and a pencil tucked behind her ear. Rita climbed the narrow staircase, rubbing her sore back, and paused outside the door. She watched her daughter's chest rise and fall with even breaths, and a surge of love so fierce it almost hurt flooded her chest. This little girl, her child, her life, was the reason she had survived. The reason she had refused to let the past define her. Rita sat at the edge of the bed, tracing the curve of Lina's cheek with her finger. Mama's here, she whispered, though Lina didn't wake. I promise you, baby, everything I do for you. One day, we'll have the world we deserve. The sound of the cafe bell chimed faintly in her memory, and her mind drifted to Aaron, the man who had destroyed her life, or at least tried to. She clenched her jaw. He had walked away, leaving her to pick up the pieces, and yet somehow, even after 7 years, he thought he had a right to show up and ask for what? Forgiveness? Understanding? Some small piece of her that she had long since buried?
No.
Rita shook her head, pushing the thought away. She had no room in her life for old ghosts. The future was hers to claim, not his. She had worked too hard, fought too hard, and survived too much to let anyone, not even him, hold power over her story. Her phone buzzed. A message from the cafe's accountant. Invoice from suppliers has issues. Payment delayed. Rita exhaled sharply and pulled the phone closer. The fight was never-ending, but it was hers to fight. And unlike the past, she was no longer alone. Lyanna, small but fierce, was her anchor. And her community. The regulars at the cafe, neighbors, friends she had slowly made along the way, were her support. She typed back quickly, setting the payment plan straight, and then leaned back, letting the exhaustion wash over her. The battle for survival wasn't glamorous. It wasn't neat. It wasn't the fairy tale she had dreamed of as a 22-year-old university student. But it was real. And Rita was still standing. Outside, the city lights flickered on, spilling golden light over the streets. Somewhere in the distance, car horns honked, people laughed, music played. Life continued. Life always continued. And Rita whispered to herself, a soft promise, more to the universe than anyone else. This time, I control my story. No one will take it from me again. She stood, brushing crumbs from her apron, and went downstairs to lock the cafe for the night. Tomorrow would be another long day, another challenge, another fight. But she would face it head-on, just like she always had. Because Rita Lawson had survived the unthinkable, and now she would thrive. The next morning, Rita woke before dawn, the city still quiet outside her apartment window. She stretched her aching back and gazed at Lyanna, still asleep. The small desk by the window was stacked with papers, invoices, and half-finished designs for new cafe pastries. Every item represented a step forward, a claim on the life she was determined to rebuild. Rita brewed coffee, the rich aroma filling the tiny apartment, and set a pot aside for the cafe. She checked the daily schedule, deliveries, staff, bookkeeping, and meetings with suppliers. Each task was a small victory, a proof that she could still take control of her life. As she left the apartment, the streets began to hum with the city's awakening. Vendors shouted their morning greetings. The smell of fried dough and roasted coffee beans mingled in the air. She smiled faintly. This was her world now, imperfect but hers. When she arrived at the cafe, the first customers were already waiting. Rita's heart lifted seeing their familiar faces, regulars who had become more than just patrons. They were witnesses to her struggle, her persistence. She greeted them with warmth, though her hands shook slightly from fatigue. Each smile she received was a reminder that she was more than the mistakes the world had tried to pin on her. By mid-morning, the phone rang. Rita answered quickly, expecting a supplier or a financial call. Instead, she heard a voice that made her stomach twist. Rita Lawson? She froze. It was calm, measured, but unmistakably Aaron. She started, then stopped herself. Her voice hardened. What do you want? I came to explain, he said, almost softly. To apologize for everything. Rita laughed, a short, bitter sound. Explain? Apologize? 7 years later? You ruined my life, Aaron. My job, my dreams, my freedom. And now you want to explain? I know, he admitted. And I don't expect forgiveness. No, she interrupted, her voice rising. You don't get to speak to me.
Not now.
Not ever. You left me to die in the system, and you don't get to come back and fix it with words. I just want to make sure you know that. Rita's fingers tightened around the phone. She could hear him fumbling for the right words, and for a moment, she almost let herself listen. Almost.
But no.
She would not give him that power. I don't want to hear it, she said finally and hung up. The cafe's door chimed as a delivery man arrived, breaking the tension like sunlight cutting through clouds. Rita exhaled, leaning on the counter. This was her life now, hers to shape, hers to protect. By lunchtime, she was moving through the cafe with fluid efficiency, checking orders, taking payments, and encouraging her staff. Lyanna would be proud, she thought. proud of her mother who had survived everything, who had built something real from the ruins. As she prepared the afternoon's pastries, Rita felt a strange flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the naive kind she had clung to as a university student, but a steady, grounded hope. The kind that came from hard work, from surviving, from protecting the one person who mattered most. And outside, the city continued to hum. People rushed, cars honked, markets shouted. Life went on. And Rita Lawson? She was finally beginning to live. Over the next few weeks, Rita settled into a rhythm she hadn't known she could manage. The cafe thrived. Morning rushes turned into steady streams of regulars, word of mouth bringing in new customers. She learned to trust her instincts, both in business and in life. Lina grew stronger each day, her laughter a balm that reminded Rita why she fought so hard to survive. But the world outside her cafe windows was not completely silent. Aaron had not given up. He appeared first indirectly, through a delivery he personally sent, a box of flowers and a note that simply said, "I owe you the truth." Rita had thrown it into the trash without opening it. Then he came again, driving past the cafe in a car she recognized instantly. Her hands clenched around the counter edge, but she said nothing, forcing herself to focus on the orders, the staff, the customers. She couldn't afford distraction. Weeks later, Aaron appeared in person, stepping into the cafe during the lunch rush. His suit was impeccable, but his eyes betrayed the weight of guilt and something more, hesitation, uncertainty. He didn't approach the counter. He just stood by the doorway, waiting. Rita spotted him immediately. Time slowed for a heartbeat. Every memory of the past, the arrest, the prison, the fear, the shame, rose up like a tidal wave. She felt the anger that had simmered for 7 years flare to life, but she also felt the power she'd earned now. She controlled this moment, not him. She walked toward him, careful to keep her voice calm, even though every word was sharpened with steel. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to make things right," he said softly. "I know I can't undo what happened, but I need you to know that I never believed you were guilty. I didn't investigate, I didn't ask, I just reacted, and it ruined your life. I'm sorry." Rita's jaw tightened. She could see the genuine remorse, but that didn't erase the years lost, the pain endured, or the child born in silence. "Sorry doesn't fix anything," she said quietly, almost too quiet for him to hear. "And I'm done letting anyone hurt me. You need to leave."
Now.
He nodded, looking almost broken. But before he could turn, the cafe door jingled again. Lina, with her usual boundless energy, came running toward her mother, her face lit with a smile.
Mom.
"Mom, guess what I learned today?" she exclaimed. Rita dropped to one knee to hug her daughter. For the first time in years, the anger and fear mingled with joy, and it felt like breathing again. Aaron watched silently, realizing that no words could compete with this bond, this life Rita had built. He finally understood. The woman in front of him was no longer the frightened, powerless girl he had accused. She was whole, strong, and untouchable. He nodded once, as if to acknowledge her victory, and then walked out of the cafe. Rita didn't follow him with her eyes. She didn't need to. She had everything she needed right here, her daughter, her freedom, her life rebuilt from the ashes. And for the first time in 7 years, Rita Lawson smiled without hesitation, without fear, without regret. She was free in a way that no injustice could ever touch again. Over the next few months, Rita poured herself entirely into her cafe and her daughter. Each day, she woke before dawn, kneading dough, grinding beans, organizing supplies, and planning menus. The work was hard, but it grounded her. Every smile from a satisfied customer, every laugh from Lina, reminded her that she had survived the worst and now controlled her own story. The cafe's reputation grew. Locals loved the warmth and care that infused every dish, every cup of coffee. Word spread that this wasn't just a cafe, it was a place where people were treated like family and where every corner held a story of resilience. Rita became a figure in the community not just for her business acumen, but for her unwavering kindness and quiet strength. But despite her successes, the shadow of the past lingered. Aaron's name, his face, haunted fleeting moments. One rainy afternoon, months after he had last appeared at her cafe, Rita saw him again, this time across the street, staring through the cafe window. He didn't come in. He didn't knock. He just watched, silently, as if trying to understand the life she had rebuilt without him. Rita's first instinct was to flee, to avoid that ghost of pain. But she stopped herself. She wasn't the same girl who had been powerless in that hotel room. She wasn't the woman who had been locked away and silenced. She was Rita Lawson, and her life was hers to command. She straightened, adjusted her apron, and carried on as if he were a shadow she didn't need to notice. Days later, Aaron appeared again, this time at the cafe door, hesitating. He finally stepped inside, looking worn and unsettled. Rita didn't move from behind the counter. Lyanna, perched on a stool with a juice box, glanced up curiously but said nothing. I need to talk, Aaron said, voice low, careful. Rita's hands paused on the coffee grinder, and she slowly turned, her eyes sharp and steady. You've had 7 years to talk, she said. You can start by leaving. Aaron flinched at the bluntness, but held her gaze. I know I can't undo what happened. I can't give you back those years or take away the pain I caused. But I want to tell you the truth, once and for all, about that night, about everything. Rita's lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time in years, she considered letting him speak. But she quickly shook her head. I don't need your truth, she said. I've built my own. I've survived. I've raised my daughter. That's my truth. Aaron swallowed hard, the weight of his guilt evident. He looked at Lyanna, playing with her straw. She's amazing, he whispered. Rita's expression softened for the briefest moment as she watched her daughter. Then she straightened again. She's mine, she said quietly, firmly. And mine alone. That's all you need to know. He nodded once, sharply, then turned and left. The door clicked behind him, leaving Rita in the cafe, the rain tapping softly against the windows. She exhaled, a slow release of tension she hadn't realized she was holding. Lyanna climbed down from the stool, wrapping her small arms around her mother's leg. Mom, are we okay? She asked. Rita knelt, gathering her daughter into her arms. We're more than okay, she said, smiling. We're free, and nothing can take that from us again. Outside, the rain washed the streets clean, shimmering under the soft glow of streetlights. Inside, the cafe buzzed with life, warmth, and the quiet power of a woman who had fought through every nightmare and had finally won. Months turned into a year, and Rita's life settled into a rhythm of survival and quiet triumph. Lyanna grew quickly, a bright, curious child who reminded everyone who met her of the fierce determination in her mother's eyes. Rita's cafe had become more than a small business. It was a sanctuary for the local community, a place where struggling students could grab a cheap meal, elders could find company, and neighbors could share stories over coffee. One evening, just as Rita was closing, a well-dressed man paused at the doorway. His presence made the bell above the door jingle softly. She looked up and froze. Aaron. He didn't rush in. He stood at the threshold, awkward, hesitant. The man she had once feared, hated, and blamed for her darkest hours now looked human. Vulnerable. He started, but stopped, struggling to find the words. I've tried to find you. I don't even know where to start. But I had to see you. Rita wiped her hands on her apron and straightened, feeling the old tension rise, but tempered now with calm control. You've found me. That's something, she said flatly, her tone steady. But I've already lived my life without you. I've survived, grown, and built something real. You can't take that back. Aaron nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. I know. I wanted to tell you that I never believed in what the hotel and the police made happen. I was manipulated, lied to, but I didn't fight for you. I regret that every day. And seeing you now, seeing what you've built, you've earned everything. Rita's throat tightened. She didn't want forgiveness. She didn't want excuses. But a part of her, buried deep under years of hurt and survival, felt the weight of acknowledgement. She studied him, the man who had once destroyed her life without knowing the truth. "You can't undo the past," she said finally. "But you can leave me in peace. Or you can respect what I've built." Aaron swallowed, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he stepped back toward the door. "I will respect you. I promise. I needed to see you once, to say it." As he left, the bell jingled again, and Rita let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Lyanna, who had been watching quietly from a corner, ran to her mother. "Mom, was that the man?" she asked. "Yes," Rita said, lifting her daughter into her arms. "But he's part of the past. We don't need to worry about him anymore. Our life is what matters." And it was. Over the next few years, Rita's cafe became renowned across the city, not just for the food and warmth, but for the story behind it, a tale of survival, courage, and a woman who refused to be broken. She started offering scholarships to young women like her once had been, those with dreams but no support. She became a mentor, a pillar of the community. One sunny afternoon, as Lyanna helped serve drinks to a group of college students, Rita leaned back against the counter, watching her daughter laugh and chatter. She realized she had finally found a life worth living, a life built not on vengeance, fear, or regret, but on love, resilience, and purpose. No matter what shadows had touched her before, she had emerged stronger. She had built a home for herself and her child, a future she could be proud of. And for the first time in 7 years, she allowed herself to truly smile, knowing that nothing, not even the worst nightmares, could ever take her spirit again. Rita's life continued to grow stronger, but the past never fully disappeared. It lingered like a shadow, a memory she carried quietly. One crisp morning, a letter arrived at the cafe, delivered by a professional courier. The envelope was thick, embossed with a legal seal. Rita hesitated, her hands trembling as she tore it open. Inside was a formal apology and an offer from a prominent law firm representing Aaron. The letter admitted wrongdoing, the hotel's negligence, the falsified accusations, and the manipulation that had led to her wrongful arrest. It offered compensation, substantial enough to ensure she never had to worry about money again, but more importantly, it acknowledged the injustice she had endured. Rita sat back, the envelope trembling in her hands. She could take the money, sue publicly, make Aaron's name synonymous with his wrongdoing, but she realized she didn't need revenge anymore. She had Lyanna. She had her cafe, her reputation, and her dignity. Justice, she understood now, wasn't always about punishment. It was about survival and reclaiming your own story. She wrote a simple response. "I accept your acknowledgement of the truth. I do not require further compensation. I have my life back, and that is more than enough." Weeks later, Aaron appeared at the cafe again. This time, his expression was humble, tentative. "Rita," he said softly, "I've corrected the record. People know the truth now. I want to do whatever I can to make amends, even if it's just supporting you quietly." Rita smiled faintly, calm and composed. "I don't need anything from you, Aaron. I survived without you then, and I thrive without you now. You can be part of your own story, just not mine." He nodded, understanding. For the first time, he left without regret or argument. Life at the cafe continued, each day brighter than the last. Rita expanded her business, creating a small network of community cafes that employed young women in need of opportunity. She became a mentor, guiding them as she had guided herself, teaching resilience, integrity, and independence. Lyanna grew alongside her, a vibrant and determined girl, inspired by her mother's courage. One evening, as Rita closed the cafe and watched the city lights glimmer across the skyline, she held Lyanna's hand and whispered, "We survived everything, my love. And now we can create whatever future we choose." Lyanna smiled, her small hand gripping her mother's tightly. "We're unstoppable, Mama." Rita laughed softly, tears in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of triumph. They had endured the unimaginable, survived the impossible, and now their life was theirs to write. The shadows of the past had no hold over them anymore. And in that moment, standing in the warm glow of the cafe, Rita realized that true freedom wasn't just being released from prison, it was reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her future. She had done that. She had truly won. Years passed, and the city changed around them, but Rita and Lina grew stronger together. The cafe, once a small table and a few chairs, had blossomed into a bustling hub of warmth and hope. The walls were lined with books, local art, and photographs of young women who had trained and worked there, each one a living testament to resilience. Rita moved with a quiet confidence now. Her once nervous gait had become purposeful. Her eyes, hardened by pain long ago, now shone with calm strength. She had built a life from the wreckage of her past, and every day was a victory. Lina, now a teenager, often helped in the cafe, her laughter echoing like sunlight. "Mama, I want to start a scholarship for young girls like me," she said one afternoon, wiping a counter with a cloth. Rita smiled, feeling the swell of pride. "Then you will, my love. And I'll be right beside you." Word of the cafe's mission spread. Women who had faced hardship came to work, learn, and rebuild. College students, single mothers, and young women with no family support found mentorship under Rita's steady hand. The small space became a haven, a place where people came not only to eat or drink but to dream, to believe in themselves again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city's glow flickered to life, Rita sat with Lina on the cafe's rooftop garden. The wind carried the scent of coffee, pastries, and jasmine from the rooftop planters. "Mama," Lina said softly, "do you ever think about what happened before we had this life?" Rita's gaze drifted to the skyline. For a moment, the shadows of the past brushed against her, painful memories of betrayal, loss, and imprisonment. But she shook her head gently, a serene smile forming. "Yes, my baby, I remember. But I don't live there anymore. That woman, that life, it doesn't define me. We do. This is who we are now." Lina leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. "I'm proud of us, Mama. I'm proud of you." Rita kissed the top of her daughter's head. "And I'm proud of you, Lina. Proud that you'll grow up knowing you can survive anything and still thrive." As the stars appeared above, sparkling over the city that had once felt so cruel, Rita knew the truth. She had reclaimed her life, rewritten her story, and created a legacy not of tragedy, but of hope. Each woman who walked through the cafe's doors, each child who looked up to her, each day of survival and triumph was a testament to the power of endurance. The past had tried to steal everything from her, but it had failed. She had risen, stronger than ever, and nothing, not prison, not lies, not betrayal, could take that away. And in the quiet of the rooftop garden, watching Lina's bright eyes, Rita finally allowed herself to feel the deepest, simplest truth: peace. Her story, once broken, had become unbreakable. Years flowed on like a river that refused to pause, carrying both mother and daughter into lives richer than either could have imagined. Lina grew into a bright, determined young woman, her mother's resilience etched into every line of her face. She excelled in school, won scholarships, and began organizing youth programs in their neighborhood, teaching young girls about ambition, self-respect, and the power of education. Rita, older now but still vibrant, watched with quiet pride as her daughter stepped into the world with the strength she herself had forged from ashes. The cafe, now a flourishing community hub, had expanded. Workshops for entrepreneurship, vocational training, and counseling sessions ran daily. Women who had once been lost to despair now laughed, learned, and thrived under her guidance. One afternoon, Rita stood in the rooftop garden, tending the herbs and flowers she had planted with Lina years ago. She noticed a young girl peeking around the corner of the cafe door, clutching a worn notebook and looking unsure. "Come in, don't be shy," Rita called, her voice warm. The girl hesitated, then slowly stepped inside. I heard about this place," the girl said softly. Can I learn? Rita smiled gently, remembering herself at that age, alone, scared, but yearning for a chance. Of course, she said. You can learn. You can grow. And we'll help you every step of the way. Meanwhile, Lina had set up a small scholarship fund in her mother's name. She often stood at the front of the cafe, reading letters of gratitude from young girls who had been given a second chance, just as she and her mother had been. Mama, Lina said one evening, look at this. She handed Rita a photo of a young girl in her first day at college, eyes wide with hope. You've changed so many lives. You've changed mine. Rita took the photo, her eyes misting over. We've changed lives together, Lina. Never forget that. And as the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, mother and daughter stood side by side, watching their little world bloom. They had survived betrayal, injustice, and heartbreak. They had built something stronger than fear or hatred. Rita finally allowed herself to whisper a quiet truth she had carried all these years. She was free. Not just from the prison that had once confined her body, but from the pain that had tried to chain her spirit. And in that freedom, she found something even more precious than survival, the power to love, to nurture, and to leave a legacy that would outlast even the darkest nights. Decades passed, and the small cafe had grown into a bustling community center, a landmark of hope and resilience in the neighborhood. The rooftop garden had expanded into a full urban greenhouse, its lush greenery spilling over the edges, tended by women and girls who had once faced struggles similar to Rita's. Lina, now in her late 20s, had taken the lead of the cafe's programs, transforming them into a full nonprofit organization. She traveled often, speaking at schools and conferences, teaching young women about education, independence, and the courage to rise above adversity. She carried her mother's lessons with her: strength, perseverance, and the unshakable belief that even in the darkest moments, life could bloom again. Rita, now older, walked more slowly but with a quiet dignity that came from years of hard-earned peace. She spent her mornings in the greenhouse, her hands deep in the soil, her eyes scanning the horizon as if looking for traces of the life she had almost lost. One crisp morning, a well-dressed woman walked into the cafe. She paused at the entrance, her eyes scanning the familiar space before settling on Rita. "Excuse me," the woman said hesitantly. "Are you Mrs. Lawson?" Rita looked up. "Yes, may I help you?" The woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "My name is Ada. I'm a journalist. I've been researching cases of injustice and women who overcame them. I wanted to share your story, to make sure the world knows what you endured and what you built afterward." Rita felt a strange warmth in her chest. For decades, she had carried the memory of that night, of the injustice, the betrayal, the hopelessness. And now, finally, someone wanted to see the truth of her life, not the false accusations, not the stolen moments, but the woman she had become. She smiled gently. "Then let's make sure they see it." Later that week, a small ceremony was held at the cafe. Former students, neighbors, friends, and supporters gathered to celebrate the center's growth and the legacy of Rita Lawson. Lina gave a speech, her voice steady and proud. "My mother," she said, "taught me that life can break you, or it can teach you to build something stronger. She has built a home, a school, a safe place, not just for me, but for countless others. She is living proof that no injustice, no matter how cruel, can define who you are unless you let it." Rita felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were not the tears of sorrow. They were tears of triumph, of healing, of justice finally served in the form of life well lived. And that evening, after the crowd had dispersed, mother and daughter walked through the greenhouse together. The sun set behind the city skyline, painting the sky in deep amber and gold. "I never thought I'd make it here," Rita whispered. "You made it because you never gave up," Lina said softly, taking her mother's hand. "You survived everything. And now you've given others the chance to survive too." Rita looked around at the thriving plants, the laughter echoing from the cafe, the letters of hope pinned to the community board. For the first time in decades, she felt whole. She had been a victim, yes. But she had also been a survivor, a mother, a teacher, a builder of futures. And in that life she had fought so hard to reclaim, she found her freedom, not just from the past, but for all the tomorrows she had yet to see. Years passed, and the city around the cafe changed. New buildings rose, streets were repaved, and people came and went. But the little community Rita had built remained a sanctuary. The greenhouse on the roof flourished, a riot of green, fruit, and flowers, tended by women and girls who had once been as lost as she had been. Rita moved slower now, her hands wrinkled from decades of hard work in both soil and life, but her eyes still held that same quiet fire. She spent her mornings teaching small groups of children about plants and nutrition, and her afternoons in the cafe, chatting with patrons and mentoring young women who reminded her of herself at 22. Lionel had grown into a strong, confident leader. She had traveled the world, spoken at international forums on women's empowerment and social justice, and returned each time to the cafe that had been her childhood sanctuary. She never forgot the nights she had watched her mother work tirelessly, the meals they had shared on the floor of their tiny apartment, or the lessons of resilience her mother had imparted. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Rita sat on the rooftop garden bench, her gaze on the city below. She could hear laughter from the cafe beneath her, the faint hum of music, the chatter of children learning and growing. Lionel joined her, sitting down beside her mother. "You ever think about how far we've come?" she asked softly. Rita smiled, a little wistfully. "Every single day," she said. "Some nights I wake up and I still remember, but then I look around and I realize how much we've built, how much we've survived. And it feels like life finally made sense." Lionel reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. "You made it all possible. You showed me that even when the world turns against you, even when people doubt you, you can rise." Rita's heart swelled. She thought of the baby she had carried in prison, the life she had fought so hard to protect, and now the daughter standing beside her, a woman carrying forward her legacy of strength, hope, and justice. I think we've created something bigger than us," Rita said, her voice trembling. "Something that will last long after we're gone." Lionel nodded, her eyes bright with determination and love. "And we'll keep building it, Mama. We'll make sure every girl, every woman who comes here knows they are not alone." As the last rays of the sun disappeared, casting a golden glow over the city and the thriving garden, Rita felt a peace she had never known in her youth. The past still whispered in her memories, but it no longer chained her. For the first time in decades, Rita felt truly free, not just from her past, but in the life she had fought to create. Around her, the garden thrived, the cafe buzzed with life, and the laughter of children floated through the evening air. And in that moment, Rita realized that she had turned her suffering into something beautiful, a legacy of hope, courage, and love that would continue long after her own story ended. Her journey had begun in darkness, but it had led her here, whole, strong, and unbroken. And that, she knew, was her triumph. Decades later, the city had grown into a sprawling metropolis, glass towers reflecting the sun like mirrors in the sky. But atop one of the older buildings, the cafe and rooftop garden still stood, a little oasis amid the urban rush. Rita, now an elderly woman, her hair silver and hands worn but steady, sat on the rooftop bench with a shawl around her shoulders. The garden around her was a jungle of colors, scents, and textures, plants she had planted herself, and others that had grown wild over the years, tended now by a new generation of young women and children. Lionel, in her 40s now, came up the stairs with a group of young interns from her sustainability initiative. They were full of energy, ideas, and determination. She had inherited her mother's fierce spirit and added her own vision for change, connecting the cafe and garden to educational programs, social projects, and global advocacy. Rita watched as the interns carefully watered the plants, checked the compost, and recorded observations. She smiled, seeing the same determination in their eyes that she had once seen in Lionel's. One of the girls, no more than 12, looked up and asked shyly, "Miss Rita, how did you make all this happen? How did you keep going when life was so hard?" Rita's eyes softened. She reached out and gently touched the girl's hand. "Because I believed," she said simply. "Even when the world tried to break me, I believed that I could create something good. That's all it takes. One small step, every day." Lina came to sit beside her mother. "Mama," she said quietly, "look at them. They're learning from you, from everything you taught me. Your story, it's still changing lives." Rita nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest that no hardship had ever given her before. "And it will keep changing lives long after we're gone. That's the miracle of hope. It spreads. It grows. It lives in others." The sun began to set, painting the city in oranges and purples. From below, the cafe buzzed with life. Children laughing, women sharing stories, a community thriving because one woman refused to let her past define her. Rita leaned back, letting the breeze wash over her. For a moment, she closed her eyes and remembered the frightened young woman she had once been, the girl who had been betrayed, imprisoned, and left to face the world alone. But that girl was gone now, replaced by a woman who had taken her pain and turned it into something far greater than herself. "Lina," she whispered, "promise me we'll never stop. Promise me we'll keep planting seeds, in gardens and in hearts." Lina smiled and squeezed her mother's hand. "I promise, Mama. We'll keep planting forever." As the city lights blinked on one by one, the rooftop garden glowed with life. Somewhere amid the vines, flowers, and laughter, Rita felt the quiet truth of her life, that even in the darkest nights, growth, hope, and love could always bloom. And in that bloom, she had finally found peace. Years had passed since that day on the rooftop, yet the city never seemed to slow. One quiet afternoon, Rita noticed a man lingering near the edge of the garden, tall, composed, and unmistakably familiar. It took her a moment, but the memory hit like a wave. Aaron. The same man who had once accused her, destroyed her life, and left scars no one could see. He looked older, the sharp edges of his youth softened, but there was still a coldness in his eyes, less cruel now, but still wary. He held a bouquet of wildflowers, slightly clumsy in their presentation, as if he'd picked them himself. He hesitated at the gate, unsure if he had the right, or even the courage, to step into her life again. Rita's heart stilled, and for a moment, she felt the old pain rise like smoke. But the years had tempered her. She was no longer that frightened, desperate girl. She stood slowly, smoothing her shawl, and faced him. "You came," she said quietly. Aaron swallowed, his throat dry. I had to. I've spent years thinking about you, about what I did, and his voice faltered. "I know I can't fix it, but I need you to know I regret it. Every day." Rita studied him, her eyes icy at first, then softening as she saw the truth in his words, the humility, the shame, the recognition of the harm he'd caused. But she didn't rush to forgive. She didn't need to. She had built a life without him, stronger and more beautiful than he could have imagined. "You ruined my life," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But I survived. I didn't wait for your apology to keep living. I built something better, Aaron. I survived because of me, not because of your regret." He nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "I know. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to tell you. I'm sorry, Rita. Truly." Rita looked past him, toward the children tending the garden, toward the laughter spilling from the cafe below, toward the life she had grown from the ashes of her pain. Then she turned back to him. "Words are easy," she said softly. "Action is harder. I hope one day you make yours count for someone, not just for yourself." Aaron bowed his head, understanding. There was nothing left to say that could undo the past. He stepped back, placed the wildflowers at the edge of the garden, and left, quietly, respectfully, leaving her world intact. Rita watched him go, then exhaled, a deep, freeing breath. The garden, the children, the laughter, They were hers, untouched by old wounds. And for the first time in decades, she felt complete peace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold, Rita knelt among the flowers, her hands in the soil, and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. For life, for resilience, for hope, and for the endless possibility of new beginnings. Her story had been carved from pain, but it had blossomed into something beautiful. And the garden, like her heart, would continue to grow. Years turned slowly, but Rita's life unfolded like a quiet triumph. The triplets, Marcus, Michael, and Emma, grew up under her patient, unwavering love. Each milestone, each scraped knee, each school achievement, reminded her that she had survived and, more importantly, that she had given life a chance to bloom again. By the time the children were 10, Rita had built a modest cafe near the heart of the city. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers, her sanctuary, her labor of love. The walls were painted soft yellow, sunlight streaming through large windows, plants hanging in every corner. She worked hard, yes, but it was different now. The work was hers to choose, not forced upon her. One crisp morning, she watched the triplets carry trays of lemonade and pastries to customers. They moved with ease and confidence, laughing as they balanced the drinks, careful not to spill. Marcus grinned at her. "Mama, look. I didn't drop a thing. You're getting better every day," she said, smiling. Michael and Emma joined him, each proud of their tiny victories. Rita's heart swelled, not with fear or pain, but with quiet joy. That same morning, as she closed the cafe's doors for a short break, a familiar figure appeared across the street. Aaron. He had aged too, not just in appearance, but in the weight he carried in his eyes. This time, though, there was no accusation, no judgment. He watched her from a distance, a careful respect in his posture. Rita met his gaze briefly, acknowledged him with a small nod, and returned to her children. She didn't need his apology anymore. She didn't need closure from him. She had her life, her family, her future. By the time the triplets were teenagers, Rita had expanded her cafe into a small community hub. She hired young people who, like her, had come from difficult circumstances. She mentored them, encouraged them, and made sure they had opportunities she never had. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, she sat on the porch of the cafe. The triplets sprawled nearby with books and sketchpads, and thought back to the life she had endured, the betrayal, the prison, the pregnancy she hadn't planned for. And she smiled, not because the pain had vanished, but because she had turned it into strength. She had transformed her scars into a foundation for life, love, and resilience. The city bustled around her, but in that little corner of sunlight, in that garden of laughter and life, Rita had found something stronger than revenge, stronger than grief. She had found herself. Years passed, and the triplets grew into remarkable young adults under Rita's careful guidance. Marcus became a thoughtful, determined young man with a passion for engineering. Michael developed a gift for storytelling and social work, while Emma's creativity and empathy made her a natural in community outreach and education. Rita watched them blossom with pride, marveling at the resilience she had nurtured. Her cafe had grown too, evolving into a hub of warmth and opportunity. She employed young people from difficult backgrounds, offering mentorship, skills training, and guidance. Every success of hers, every smile she inspired, was a quiet act of defiance against the years of injustice she had endured. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Rita stood outside her cafe, watching the triplets play with children from the neighborhood. Their laughter mingled with the golden light, a balm to her memories of pain and imprisonment. She felt a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing you've survived and rebuilt on your own terms. Aaron's presence returned one afternoon, though not as an antagonist. He came quietly, observing from across the street. Their eyes met briefly. There was no bitterness now, only acknowledgement. He had long since recognized the truth of her strength and integrity, though words were unnecessary. Rita simply nodded to him once and returned to her family and work. As the triplets grew older, Rita's story became one of inspiration for her community. She gave talks at schools, mentored young women who had faced adversity, and quietly transformed lives without seeking recognition. By the time Marcus, Michael, and Emma were adults, the cafe had expanded into a small chain, employing dozens and giving countless young people opportunities. Rita often sat quietly in her office, watching them lead projects, make decisions, and help others. She had survived the worst life could throw at her, and she had emerged stronger, wiser, and filled with purpose. On a quiet evening, with her children grown and pursuing their own dreams, Rita sat on her porch, a gentle smile on her face. The night was calm, the stars reflected in her eyes. She thought back to every hardship, every betrayal, every stolen moment of innocence. And she understood something profound. Though life had taken much from her, it had also given her the chance to create a legacy of love, courage, and resilience. And in that moment, Rita finally felt whole. Years later, the streets around Rita's cafe buzzed with familiar life. Children laughing, neighbors greeting one another, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee spilling into the warm afternoon air. The cafe had grown into a beloved institution, a place where families came to gather, students came to study, and the community came to heal and celebrate together. Rita, now older but still upright and strong, sat at her favorite table by the window, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. Her hair had streaks of silver, and fine lines traced the corners of her eyes, but her presence radiated the same quiet authority she had cultivated over years of struggle. The triplets were all thriving in their respective fields. Marcus had become an engineer running a small but innovative firm. Michael was a writer and community organizer whose stories inspired others to rise above hardship, and Emma had established a nonprofit dedicated to education and creative expression for underprivileged children. All three were married, and each had children of their own. Today, the cafe was alive with the laughter of the next generation. Rita's grandchildren ran through the open spaces, chasing each other around the tables while older children painted murals on the walls, leaving their colorful marks as a reminder that this space belonged to the community. Rita watched them and felt a deep, quiet satisfaction. Each generation carried forward not just her name, but the values she had fought so hard to instill: courage, resilience, empathy, and integrity. She remembered the long, dark nights of prison, the helplessness, the fear, and the injustice that had tried to crush her. And yet, here she was, not only surviving but thriving, surrounded by the living proof that life could be rebuilt, brick by brick, heart by heart. From the cafe doorway, Marcus called to his children, "Time to wash up for dinner," while Emma helped Michael corral the youngest ones. Rita smiled to herself and whispered softly, almost to no one, "We made it, my loves. We really did." The night fell gently, and as the stars emerged over the city, Rita felt the quiet certainty of legacy, not the wealth or status stolen from her long ago, but the love, strength, and hope she had nurtured in her children and their children. And in that legacy, she found the justice, the peace, and the triumph she had waited for all those long years. Rita's story had become more than survival. It was now a living testament to endurance, courage, and the unyielding power of hope.